supernatural experiences, let's say, but very light in terms of, literally seeing light behind my closed eyes and watching it kind of descend through my body and feeling a warmth with that and, it moving me to tears, even though I wasn't sure what was happening. One quote unquote realm, as I would call it, a realm. But like I say, it's not like I'm very aware that I'm still in my body as well. Because there are times where I have seen like a hallway that feels very much like, I mean, it's very bright and it's like I'm moving through a corridor. And I'm like,
Mhm.
am I on a ship or am I like in a place? And then I like feel back into my body. I'm like, no, I'm in my bed. Like I'm here. I'm in like the physical
Right.
world too,
Yeah.
but I'm also like I can very clearly see a hallway.
So vision. I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of the Soul Inspired. Today we have Kara Goodwin with us. I've been having some conversations with her. I'm really excited to talk to her. She's a podcast host of the Soul Elevation podcast. She's also a spiritual guide, and she's had mystical experiences that somewhat would resemble what we're used to with near-death experiences and things like that. So we're going to dig into the different things that have happened in her life, why she is where she's at, and get to know her a little bit. So thank you so much, Kara, for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Joe, thank you so much for having me on. You have such a great platform, and I'm so excited to be here with your listeners.
I'm excited to get to know more about your platform, the things you do. I really appreciate that. I start each episode the same way, and I really try to get personal a little bit, just to kind of like almost like shed the ego a little bit and go into our childhood. I go to little Kara when you were young, and I don't know when experiences or things like that started in your life. We're going to get to know about that a little bit, but regardless of that, if there was anything in childhood, I would even go prior to that if you can, and just to get an idea of who you were, the type of personality you were as a little Kara, and maybe the influences around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love going back to the early times, and I feel that the deeper you go into your spiritual work, that becomes more and more relevant, and we can change so much, especially when we are on a deliberate uh, self evolution path. So when I look back at myself and I kind of characterize myself, I was definitely a rule follower. I loved to excel. I didn't grow up in a particularly religious household, but we would go to church sometimes in an Episcopal church, so the, Christian tradition, but we weren't really like members where you really get involved beyond just going every once in a while. And I was like that for a while, and just very studious and appreciated, excelling and very kind of, I feel like I trained myself to be more left-brained as I went through life because you
Mhm.
learn how to adapt. Something that comes to mind when you ask me about little Kara that came up in an episode that I recorded with somebody recently that she reminded me of because she was saying it about herself that I remember wondering a lot if I was adopted. And, in a particular period of time, maybe I was like 6 or 7. And I don't know if it's that I learned what adoption was. I think that there was somebody in my, like, a babysitter's neighbor or something who was adopted. And then, so you kind of learn that this is a thing.
Mhm.
And then wondering, like, am I adopted? Who is my real family? And this guest that I had on was kind of like she always felt that that wasn't her real family, and it brought me back to that because I was like, yeah, I think part of it was that I realized that wasn't a thing, and then I think part of it was also feeling that there was something that I was connected to that wasn't that earthly family. And I've been having more and more memories lately of little Kara and just how different she was from who I am now. The things like being the rule follower, really wanting to, really trusting authority and wanting to be good. And that I still want to, I mean, it's not like I want to rebel for the purpose of rebellion, for rebellion's sake, but I definitely don't trust authority the way that I used to. And that's not a driving factor. The rule following is not, it's not a big motivator for me anymore. It's really part of my own evolution has been what is true for me and what is aligned for me. So it's interesting to look back, like I said, and to be like, yeah, that is something that I really, really valued, being seen as being good and that I've outgrown on my path. So that's what comes up for me when I think about my childhood.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And it's interesting only because, I mean, every time I'm talking to somebody, I can't help, just probably like the listeners out there, you have kind of a comparison to yourself, right? So, rule following, obviously, I did have that. But when you said left brain, I was more right brain. So I
Mm.
immediately went into the creative arts and music. That was the thing that kind of I grabbed a hold of. It could be because I had some troubling things that happened in my childhood with, parental stuff. And so I needed kind of an outlet. So I went music, and that brought on that creative side of me. So I was always there. So as much as I was always fighting to be more left brain. I remember it through school. I'd always be like trying to just follow what everyone else would do, but then feeling uncomfortable doing that and thinking, why do I feel so out of place? And
That's
so,
amazing
yeah.
that you like were so aligned so early because I feel like that's the natural inclination for a lot of people, and we learn that that's not how we entrain ourselves to be human, right? And what does it mean to be part of society and culture and a lot of us are, especially that good girl kind of thing. It's like, oh, okay, well, I was interested in the arts, as well, and I would have loved to have been a musician or to be a singer or to, explore that. But it was this through schooling and through just picking up on, okay, well, how do we grow up? Okay,
Mm.
well, people go to the office and people, do things that they don't really like doing. So, what's the thing that I don't like doing that I can do okay to be able to make a
Yes,
living?
absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, I remember in high school I did that. I went to my guidance counselor and he said, "Well, what do you want to be?" And I thought, well, what makes a lot of money? And so he pulled out this list of a college near me and he said, here's all the top paying, I said, okay. I think I picked the third from the top to be a computer science technician. And
I was in computer sciences
there
too.
you go.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
decided at that time, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. I ended up graduating it, getting into it, and regretting it very quickly because I
Yeah.
was like, we talked earlier about when I met you. I said these are like my people. I feel very connected to the people I talk to. It felt very opposite of that. They were nice people, but I had no connection. There was something felt very distant. So it didn't make any
Yes.
sense to me because I wasn't dealing with people's personalities. I was dealing with hunks of metal and coding and doing different things, like things that did not to take away from anyone listening that does that. I'm not, if you love that, that's great. But for me, it didn't make sense to me. So
Yeah.
quickly moved away from that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying. For some people that does like that excites them and I saw that with the people that I was working with because I literally started out of college as a coder. Like I was coding a programmer. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
what I want to say. And I saw people who just innately understood computers and enjoyed it and they would go home and be on computers after work. This was before we had computers in our pockets with the smartphones and things like that, but that was not me. I'd have friends who, because I majored in a computer type of major, they would have a virus or, some sort of computer problem, and they would contact me because they would assume that I know computers because I studied them, and I'd be like, oh, that's terrible. You should probably call somebody about that. Like because
Right.
I didn't enjoy it. So I only
Right.
learned what I needed to know to be able to do my job and to graduate first and then to do my job. But it wasn't anything that I was passionate about. But there are people who are. And so, and you were passionate about music and you followed that much sooner than I followed what really lit me up and allowed that to lead me.
Yeah. So you, I love that. So you at some point, when was it that you started to realize that the path you were taking wasn't the path that felt authentic to yourself in respect to the
Yeah.
work you do now?
hmm it was a sort of a slow process because I actually walked away from my corporate life more to do with an international move that my due to my husband's job. But before that opportunity came up, I was very conflicted about where I was in the world because I had two young kids. We had three pets. We had, a house to that just we were very busy, and we both our careers, my husband and I, our careers were going 1,000 miles an hour. And so I still call the situation I was in the golden handcuffs because I
Mhm.
was doing very well and I was being compensated very well. I was having great performance reviews. My kids were fine, but I felt like I was doing everything half, what I could. And I was having trouble prioritizing. I understood like I was very highly compensated, so I felt that I owed my job the most of me. And but I'd also like had a family because I wanted to have a family. I dreamt my whole life of having kids and being a mom, and so it was very, but that I felt that that came second because that's what I was seeing and that's what I felt the expectation was, even though my job, truthfully, they were very supportive of working mothers. And that's another thing that made it hard to walk away. I worked for a huge company and they wanted to have working mothers. They wanted to support, they wanted to be the type of employer who won awards for working mom, support and things like that. So
Right.
if I was like, oh, I've got to take my kid's sick and I need to pick them up from daycare, like it was no questions asked. But I still felt like I was, you just the way that the day is organized, you take your kids to daycare kind of right away. You maybe get an hour with them, and then you pick them up, and maybe you get like 2 hours with them, and then they're sleeping and you're just doing this constantly, and it's like, is this real? Is this
Yeah.
what we are agreing to? I'm
Mhm.
outsourcing. I just felt like I was outsourcing something that was so important to me. Again, there are people who that works for them. They feel this true joy contributing to what they're doing. But for me, that was not the case. I was not feeling fulfilled. So when we had this opportunity to move to Italy, I was like, great. I would love to live in Italy and I would love to not have this, should I stay or should I go? Is it stupid for me to walk away from this? It really kind of set things up to be able to say, okay, well, we want to take this opportunity and I'm going to not work. Like it would have been difficult for me to, or for our family, if I was like, okay, now let me find my job, when we have no network here and so forth.
Mhm.
So that was a temporary situation. We lived there for about 4 years, but that really gave me the space that I was looking for to really be more hands-on and go to my kids' classroom and help out and all of that. But it still didn't do what I guess needed from a soul level in terms of waking me up to
Right.
to this version of myself that I am now. That came because I had a series of things happen very quickly and my life just started to crumble. So we were a couple of years into living in Italy, and um, the I just it was one thing after another. It started with the death of my sister-in-law, who was one of my best friends. And shortly after, like, I mean, a couple weeks after that, our dog died. A few weeks after that, my stepdad was having surgery on his brain stem. A few weeks after that, my mother-in-law was hit by a motorbike as she crossed the street.
Wow.
And then it was a couple months after that, my stepmom ended up in the ICU with a failing heart. And the only thing then, and what saved her was a heart transplant, which is probably one of the most serious operations that you can have. So that was just an hour, my husband and my immediate family type of thing. But at this time, we also had like a very dear friend of ours who had been in our wedding, who was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and he passed away the next year. So it was just a very concentrated time of feeling like my life just completely spun around and things seemed so unsure. And it was literally at a certain point, it just felt like every day was going to bring something new and heartbreaking. And it was through that that I explored meditation, because meditation had been something that I had been interested in, because really my whole life I had been drawn to stories like near-death experiences and, people who connect with spirits on the other side, any of those sorts of stories. I remember when my kids were little and I'd be breastfeeding them or something, and I'd always have a book on the go. And a lot of times at that point, I was reading about children remembering their past lives, the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson. And he was associated with the University of Virginia. Like that was an academic research of this, phenomenon. That's a global phenomenon. So I was always interested in that, and I would want to have my own sorts of experiences, but meditation always seemed like one of those pathways to get you more connected with the other side or with these mysterious phenomena.
Hmm.
So I had tried meditation lightly and really not gotten anywhere with it. And so I never really picked up a proper practice. I kind of felt like it wasn't for me. And it was when my life came crashing down, eventually I was like, okay, I really think that I'll benefit from meditation now. I really truly want to get serious about learning it. And once I made that decision, a lot of synchronicities happened. I recognize that looking back. I didn't kind of make that connection at the time, but
Hmm.
I found a teacher, and I got a method, and I became dedicated to doing it regularly. And it was through that, and then starting to have some interesting, I guess, kind of paranormal experiences, but just within my own supernatural experiences, let's say, but very light in terms of, literally seeing light behind my closed eyes, and watching it kind of descend through my body and feeling a warmth with that, and it moving me to tears even though I wasn't sure what was happening.
Hmm.
um, Seeing like a spiraling galaxy in my mind's eye where I had no frame of reference as to, so I was just meditating and I had my eyes closed, and then I just started seeing this spiraling galaxy like I was looking at it from a distance. I had no idea why I would see something like that, what that was. I asked my teacher, and they were like, that's interesting, just let it go. Not knowing, and I had no, like, I didn't know what a starseed was. I didn't know that there was any connection with ET phenomena and spirituality and spiritual growth. That came years later, that I knew that there was any correlation with that. And then it took even longer for me to understand that that related to me and my own personal experience. So there were those kind of gentle experiences that started to open me up more to the more of the spiritual nature
Hmm.
that that is the underpinning of reality truly.
Wow. Thanks for sharing all that. So many things went through my mind there, from everything from, through my life, I've had good friends or even just known people who've had a lot of success in their life. And when I talk about that, I mean monetary success, whether it's, being well paid, good jobs, things like that. Um, a lot of them are very grateful for it and they've done well. And then there's other ones that, I physically would see crumble from it, and um, almost confused by that, right? I right away always knew that I couldn't do work that didn't speak through my soul. When I tried to, I got very sick all the time. I was sick, sick, sick. I was always coming down with every virus that was available. I'd have other ailments happening. Like my body just did not allow me. And maybe going back to what you said earlier, maybe it's because at such a young age, I really went that into that creative right brain side, understood how much more we are. So when I tried to fit myself into um, that that space, it never felt good, and I always kind of struggled with that. But I have seen people go through that, and you think to yourself, wow, we're all chasing this success, and then you get there and you go, what's going on? Why do I still feel empty? Not everybody, but this is a very common thing. I mean, in the music industry, it's very common. I mean, how many musicians do we lose? How many? And these people are being very well paid, moving around and doing music, but there's something in there that obviously is not speaking to them because they're probably not being able to be their authentic musician self. They're now a product, and once you become a product, I mean that gets really deep, and I don't want the music industry coming after me, but there's a lot to that, and you see how far these people go, and then they're gone, and it's sad. And so, I hear your story and it sounds like you were going through not that deep. I don't know, but you were having success, but feeling like something was still missing. Obviously, feeling disconnected from even your kids because you weren't able to actually have that experience you were trying to have that you want. And I have two young, little, like I said earlier, I have two young ones, little ones in daycare. Like my second youngest is in daycare. And there's days where I feel bad about that. But luckily I'm an entrepreneur. I work from home. I do different things. I have a little more time. It's not like that. I'm not gone from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. every day, or anything like that. But I'm busy, but I can feel where you're going through there. Then you move into this space of, and this is where I'm going to ask you a question. I notice this with a lot of people's storylines is when they get to a certain level in their life where they're seeking something, but they don't know what that thing is. There's like this longing for something greater than themselves or bigger than themselves that they know that they're supposed to be going through, but they can't quite figure it out on their own. For some reason, a lot of life challenges start to arise, and I hear this often. Now, I'm not saying because of what you're going through, all these family members and friends were passing and things like that. But it is interesting that that is usually what is the catalyst to propel us into this holy. I need to self-discover, and it sometimes takes us that much. We have to get to that point in order to feel that, if that makes sense, to get to that space.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've heard that a lot with people you work with, but I find it a lot. And I'm always like,
Yeah.
okay, so one of the grand purposes of probably why I love running this podcast and maybe why you like running yours is because I'm trying to bring knowledge and wisdom to people to help them propel themselves to that place without feeling the need to do it when it gets really tough. And does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I love so much of what you said, and there's so many different avenues to go. Because again, like you were saying, my mind's going a million miles a minute as you're like, pointing me in different directions there. Because you're absolutely right. I think my sort of malaise with my work, my with my career was rooted in not being in alignment. It was rooted, my life was so oriented in the material world and really in kind of a survival. Even though I was really well compensated, there was still the survival instinct with it of just like, needing to be part of this generating money. And it really was about the security and continuing to have security for my future. And having that really be the driver of all of my moments, and giving myself over to that, and recognizing that there was another part of me that really wanted the relationship and with my kids, with my family, and really wanted to nurture that. Now, once I got that through our move, I look back, because when you said you used to get really sick, this is one of the things that I went through too. I would have respiratory illnesses all the time, especially like this time of year with the change of seasons.
Mm.
I would get these respiratory infections. The cough would last for weeks. I remember having to like I would choose to sleep in the guest room so that because I would just wake up coughing, couldn't stop, and I didn't want to, wake up my husband. So this would happen not just this time of year. It would happen in the summer as well. I'd get it like, I don't know, a few, at least once a year, but usually more than that, and have to be on antibiotics and all of this. That continued when we moved until I developed a dedicated meditation practice. And once I started meditating and there was breath work that went along with that too, I suddenly noticed, wait, I got through this season and I didn't get sick. I didn't get the
Mm.
flu. I didn't get a respiratory illness. And now it's really unusual for me to get a cold. I might get like a little cold every now and again, but it's rare. And even when I do get, you can kind of hear it in my nose and things, but it doesn't develop into a full-blown infection. It's been years and years since I've had to take an antibiotic. And um, so that I think, our physical health, it's an indicator of what's happening within us and that alignment that we have. And when we do have that alignment, everything gets in alignment. Our physical body, our emotional body, our mental body. So there is this ripple there is this alignment, and it does affect our physical health, which is really an amazing side effect, I think, or it could be, the thing that brings us to something like meditation because we want to get a better hold on our health. But that dark night of the soul that you're talking about in terms of us, kind of some of us needing a trigger to really start to pay attention and make the changes to get us on the path that we were here to live. I see my life now as a mission that I was brought here to have a physical experience on a soul mission.
Mm.
And that a part of that mission is just being here. It is just allowing myself to be in alignment and letting things flow from there so there's not necessarily like, I need to raise this much money so that I can, create this hub of whatever. And, I don't even see it as concrete as that. And some people do have that concrete type of thing. But for some people, it is just allowing that embodiment and allowing that to lead and to radiate from us and to ripple out and affect people how it will affect them. And I think that's part of what I'm here to do. Um, but the dark night of the soul for me seems to have been a necessity. And who knows if I had taken the clue earlier,
Mm.
maybe some of those events wouldn't have happened, or maybe they would have been more spread out, or I don't know. This is like this masterful design from the soul that involves other souls as well. And so, we can never know. I often think it'd be really cool to like be tapped into a parallel timeline where it's like, okay, well, if we, if we'd stayed in Italy, what would that be like? My husband's English. We lived in England for a while, so it's like, what if we never moved back to America? What would that timeline be like? What would our kids be like? And all of those, I love to run those like mental experiments of just, we
Yeah.
have these big places where our lives diverge. But I do know that like you say, it is common. It is one of the paths to awakening where there is a dark night of the soul. There are multiple ways that our life kind of falls apart, and that's what gets our attention. And it is beautiful to offer things like this for people who are already curious about it and already sort of drawn to it, where maybe, they can get into alignment without needing that kind of big hit in their lives to kind of like get them off kilt. And then they're like, wait a minute, what is happening? Something's got to change because this isn't working,
Right. Right. And saying that even as simple as if you are in alignment, then those events may still happen, very likely, but the effect that it has on us changes because, I was just having this discussion the other day around I have a student that I've been coaching, music in, and she's going to be traveling and seeing all the ancient Mayan um, areas of the world, and we were talking about the Mayans, and we were talking about how somehow in their uh, civilization, in their time frame, they saw death so different than we did. In fact, they played games where whoever won, I could be getting this wrong, but whoever won the game was able to die, and which is incredibly insane to think about, because you think, well, why would you want that? But
The reverse Hunger Games.
exactly, and it's and the reason why it's so interesting is because it shows you just how opposite to the way they were looking at life. Like we are more on the fear-based side of death and the ending of the existence of our ego and all those types of things, right? So it's kind of this like, oh my
It's
gosh,
an
I need to hold on, I
inversion.
need to hold on. But if you are in alignment with your purpose, if you're in alignment with what's out there and what's big, what's actually going on, then when things around you start to happen, as sad as it is in the physical, you would see it in a different it's like a different vision, right? It's just something
Mm.
completely different. So it wouldn't affect you in the same way. In fact, you may even celebrate someone's passing, or you may celebrate the life that they had, or that type of thing. It's a different way of looking at things. I just wanted to mention that. I also wanted to pivot back a minute because you did mention that you, through the meditation practice, you started having some experiences, and you mentioned the spiraling galaxy that you had. I'm assuming this was one of these mystical experiences that we were referring to before we started talking.
That's a light one. So that was an
Oh,
early one that was just sort of like, what in the world is this? And it was, a few minutes long. So yeah, I would include that, but it was not the same. I mean, I didn't really feel like I went to a different realm or,
hmm.
tapped into a quantum space necessarily. It was just like literally this visual spiraling galaxy, and that was kind of it. Like I just saw it. I
Hmm.
didn't and I was like, what the heck is that? Why would I
Right,
see
right,
that? Or
right.
I remember a lot of times I would be doing something as a child, like playing with my friends or something, and then I would see us from the outside, like as though I was observing us,
Hmm.
but I would put it down to my imagination, where it was like, oh, this is what we would look like if I was somebody else looking at us. But I could see that. And that was just a normal thing that I would do. And then I had that experience a few months ago, earlier this year, where I was like in my hot tub and then I could see me, like, it was like I could see me from the sky from that perspective. So I could see me from kind of far away where I was, but it was so natural and it was so instant. And again, it feels kind of like my imagination, like, oh, this is what I look like from the outside. And if I was up in the sky, and I was in a helicopter or something. Um, but it's such a natural, like sudden, instant thing. But it feels so natural as well. I just love that you bring that up because that resonates with me so much too. And it's like this almost like an art that I just could do naturally as a child, and
Hmm.
then it kind of got buried and didn't do it anymore.
Yeah. I love how
But
you say it's like the imagination, because I've had this talk with many people on the show, especially people who've had NDEs, is that we've lost the art of using our imagination, because when we're children, I think we're told it's our imagination, and that it's almost like, well, it's just your imagination. So what we do is we actually are pushing down what imagination is, where in fact imagination is everything. It
yeah,
is it's actually how we create. I mean, when you start talking about people creating life, like, or creating things in their life, you imagine it first, and all of a sudden it appears in your life. You go, wow, what a coincidence! No, it's not a coincidence, because that's what imagination is. It's the creation. It's the energetic ability of creating the things in your life you want, which we can do on the other side in a second. But here we can't. Our vibration is way too low. Everything's going very slow, so it can come up, but you have to keep imagining these
yeah,
things. But we're put that's pushed down as kids to think that it's actually not something that matters. And I think
right.
that as we progress as a humanity, if we can somehow come to realize, no, that's a big piece of who we are. I mean, that goes down the whole rabbit hole of what we could learn from ET if we go down that road. But like all these things, because we aren't completely living fully yet as
Right.
what we are. And I think once we get there, you're going to see a lot of things change. I know I'm
Yeah.
getting all out there right now, but that's just my personal opinion on the imagination stuff.
Well, and it's so relevant. I like to talk about it too as the imaginal realm. So rather than like imagination, which sounds like we're making it up, but our imagination is tied to the imaginal realm, which is where spirits hang out and where, ideas before they're manifested come in, and where telepathy is, and all of this, where it's a a realm around us. It's not a distant place, but it's just not physicalized. And our imagination is a way to tune into that non-physicalized reality. And we can tune in. So, like you're talking about with manifestation, this has been really manifesting our reality. What is the reality that we want to live? And this is something that's been really, really coming in strong in my world right now, where it's just like the ability to hold focus on what I desire. So for me, like sovereignty, freedom, that is foundation for humanity. You talk about the way that we see the world, the way that we experience death, the way and the fear around it, and that's not even like, it's such a different reality to the Mayans, for example, to indigenous ways of living across the world, where they just understood death as another birth. I see the modern life that we have in the West, that most of us are a part of, as inverted. It's not just that
Mhm.
it's opposite to these native indigenous ways of living. It's a deliberate inversion of the truth of
Wow.
reality. And the way through that is is the manifestation of sovereignty and freedom. And that is so much deeper than what we think of with democracy and what we might think of as living in a quote unquote free world. It's not about even the government per se. It's not about somebody else giving us that freedom, but it is us stepping into the sovereignty of, I am a soul, and that is who is running this show, and then allowing everything to organize. It's allowing our reality to organize through that. I was listening to an episode of yours with some really fascinating man, and I can't remember, maybe his name was Andrew. I can't remember,
Oh yeah,
but
Andrew. Yeah, he's been on twice now. Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And
Andrew
he
Bauer.
was saying, that you were talking about 2027, 2032, and that
Mhm.
that there are these big changes that are projected to come, that, reality is going to shift. And he was saying, people talk like that, but it's not going to happen. It's going to take years. It's going to take centuries. It's going to take
Mhm.
centuries. This is not something that happens quickly. I don't disagree with him based on our history and what we're told of our history. We have no reason to think that that's not true, because we see how slowly things have happened in the past.
Right.
But we also have not really tapped into the real potential of who we are as humans. So the more of us who are high vibrational, who are powerful, who are tapping into our power, who are recognizing who we really are, and we are holding that vision of freedom and sovereignty, even if we just hold it for like 17 seconds a day or 17 seconds a few times a day, really tuning into, we are free. We are free. We are free. And the way that I see it is like holding it out in front of like my third eye, my heart, between the two of them, feeling my third eye and my heart like energizing that, but understanding that the world, the universe, the way the universe is designed, that will hold a vibration. The longer we can hold that focus, and again, it just needs to be like 17 seconds or 28 seconds or 51 seconds. Like, this doesn't need to be for hours and hours and hours of the day, but just holding that focus. the universe will deliver, it will just magnetically align more and more energy to build that up. And then you've got people who could be doing this, who are manifestors
Mhm.
and who are not driven by their ego, who are not doing this to like make $1 zillion and to have power over people, but who really want to be in for this to be a free and sovereign realm and for everyone to have that freedom and sovereignty. The universe is mysterious. It responds to that vibration. And
Mhm.
and so we have the capability to say, like, yes, from a linear perspective and from what we know from history, change in a dramatic increase of consciousness is going to take centuries, or or we work on it in a totally different way that we have not been utilizing properly because we've believed
Yeah.
in the inverted reality.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I appreciate you bringing that up because I wanted to touch on that. I've had a few people write to me personally about it. I haven't responded to anybody yet about it because Andrew's amazing and his experiences were amazing. His near-death
Yeah,
experiences.
totally.
He's one of these people that when I remember when I was interviewing, I believe everybody I'm interviewing. That's part of why I do what I do. I have to put myself every time I'm speaking with a guest, I'm I'm with them and I have to be. I think that's what makes a good host. I think that's what makes a good, it doesn't mean I may feel different afterwards, but with Andrew, it was very authentic. And I actually believe a lot of what he's saying. I believe that it will take hundreds of years to get to where he probably was seeing in his vision. You have to remember this was a person who spent what felt like thousands of years on the other side. So his vision of that end goal is probably accurate. For the average person, I do believe there's going to be a lot of shifts coming very quickly. Regardless, that's probably the end goal that he's seeing. I also believe that once this is where I kind of relate to what you're saying. Once we awaken more to the things happening, most people, once they've had some type of awakening, then their inversion reality no longer exists and they start to question things. And then belief starts to happen. And once belief starts to happen, that's where the rapid change starts to happen because then we all are seeing things different. It's the same thing. I still want to talk about any experience you've had, but I want to bring up. I'm doing this right now because it's so current right now, and this might 3 years from now people will be like, oh, I remember that 3 Atlas.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
This object that's moving at such a tremendous speed. There's a lot of misinformation out there, but what I've gathered, and some of what I'm about to say may be inaccurate, so please, anybody that's listening that has different information, I apologize if for what I've heard, but this is what I've gathered from numerous people who have quite a bit of respect, right? Whether it's Avi Loeb or different people. And this thing is massive. It's the size of, I don't know if someone said like
Manhattan, I
Manhattan,
think.
5,000 pyramids. It's like it's huge. This thing is huge. Now the mass of that would be very heavy. And what they're finding is that when it was flying through past Mars, usually a mass at that weight would affect even in a slight way gravitation from even distances of millions and millions of kilometers away. But they're finding that's not happening. Now, again, that could
Yeah.
be completely inaccurate. It could be just a flying rock going through our solar system. But then
But
you have the
would that also like mean that it's self-propelled? Like because it's not using the gravitational pull?
well, this is
Or
where
like it,
this is why we're
I
in a
don't know.
very interesting time right now. And yesterday being the 29th, today being the 30th. By the time this episode comes out, I'm sure it'll be past that. But this is when it's emerging outside of the sun. And the interesting
Right.
fact of that is, as it's coming out of the sun, we can't see it because the sun is just the glare of the sun. We're not going to see it for weeks correctly. We're going to get a good image after. And once that happens, Well, we're gonna know a lot more. This thing does not contain iron, which is also very bizarre because every natural occurring rock like that that would have the other pieces of it would have iron in it. Iron is usually removed to create spacecraft we have and things like that. That's a weird coincidence. Uh, um, and they've never really seen that a natural, you know, it's just it's so there's all these. And again, I'm no scientist, so I'm speaking through hearsay, right, through things I've heard.
Mhm.
And the problem with TikTok and Instagram, you get all these falsehoods as well. So I trust the scientists out there, but I'm very interested to see what happens here. But even let's even take it a little further because this thing may just propel itself through our solar system and leave, okay? And that is very likely what it could happen. But who's to say that there's still no effect?
Right.
Meaning, this thing has come from somewhere else for some reason. There was this, I don't know who suggested this, but you look at a dandelion, and a dandelion, it grows and it has this beautiful flower, and then it dies off, and then the pieces of the dandelion fly, and they're like little seeds, and they plant new dandelions, right? They fly off, and they okay. And the idea was that this thing could be going through and releasing whatever, something beyond what we understand, which would ultimately affect our progression. And
Right.
we won't know that until it's happening. And there will be a delay. And so we could just watch this rock go through. It's a very strange that they said I read somewhere that the idea that it's hit all these planets in such a fashion is the same as standing in a skyscraper and throwing a paper airplane on one side of a city and it landing into a mailbox on the other side of the city. That's
Right.
that's
The
how
precision.
rare that
Yeah.
that is. Now, can it happen? Yes. Is it likely? No. So
It's probably like, literally astronomically, to use
exactly.
a pun, but
Yeah.
like astronomically unlikely that it
Hmm.
would naturally be able to do that.
Yeah, and I have many people I've talked to who see it as just, oh, Joe, it's not much of that. It's just a rock, and that's fine too. But there's just a lot of odd things going on, and right now, 2025 going in 20, like why the timing? Why is it all happening at this time? And so I do believe, and sorry to go on here, but I do believe there's a shift happening. I mean, everyone
Hmm.
feels it. They feel it energetically. Look at AI, all of a sudden has emerged, and AI can help with everything. And there's good and there's bad of AI, and everything's happening very quick. And I think people just need to hold on. And this is why this is a crucial time for us to get in touch with our higher piece of who we are. I don't know if you want to touch on that, and then maybe a little bit of kind of what happened to you when you had this kind of
Yeah.
other realmly experience.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'm fascinated by Three Eye Atlas too. And you're right, like we just everybody is speculating, even Avi Loeb, where it's like he's just taking the information that's available and he's very rightly saying like this is what we can glean from it, but we don't know. We haven't experienced this before. There are actually two other comets in our system right now as well. So two comets and Three Eye Atlas, which it's like, is this a comet? Or kind of thinking like the official response is like, okay, it's a comet, but it's being weird. It's like the tail, there's like no tail sometimes. Sometimes the tail is facing the sun, which is not a thing that happens
Right,
naturally.
right,
It's
right.
changing color, it's doing all these strange things. But and so it's interesting, you bring these two anytime there's celestial body, celestial activity affects us. It is energy. And there are prophecies around these things. And when you look at things astrologically, which is an interest of mine, but I'm not studied in it. So I'm no authority in the astrology, but I know enough to know that different star alignments, there have been huge things that have happened, concerning like, for example, I believe that there are two planets. I want to say it's like Saturn and Jupiter or something. And I know Jupiter's like officially not a planet, but or no, not Jupiter, Pluto. I can't remember what they were, but two specific like rare planetary alignments that are we're having right now that were the last time it was like 600 plus years ago, and it was with the separation of the Catholic Church from England. And it's, that was a big time because you've got this church and state thing and all of these things. And then we see things kind of circling back through that have common, um, I mean, something that maybe doesn't sound too earth shattering, but I heard that the King Charles, went to the Vatican. It was the first time, like recently, and was the first time that any English royalty had been to the Vatican since the split. He brings his, divorcee wife, who that was the whole reason for the split with Henry VIII, because he wanted to, there was that thing with Anne Boleyn, and there was this, but they wanted to have a divorce so that they could get married and the church wouldn't allow it. So that was kind of the impetus for the separation. And now we've got, anyway, so there are all these themes that are like, that's really interesting. We're not necessarily saying anything caused anything, but just interesting that these shifts align with world events that mirror when that type of thing has happened in the past. And so we are really affected by celestial activity. And when we have things like comets that come in, that also affects us. Then you've got something like Three Eye Atlas. I agree 100% with what you're saying, where it may not come and land on the White House lawn. I doubt it would do that. We may not notice from a planetary effect, from a planetary perspective, any physical effect where it's like, oh, this happened and the sky turned pink at night, or, whatever. It may slip past our human perception. It may slip past our ability to measure changes based on the instrumentation that we have and the way that science is looking at it. But it definitely doesn't mean that it's not affecting us at an energetic level. And that's one of the things I think to keep in mind too when we think about extraterrestrial life and planets and stars that people feel a connection to. So for example, the Pleiadian system, a lot of people feel a connection to the Pleiadian system. And from our instrumentation, we may say like, well, you can't have life in the Pleiades because the chemical composition, like life can't be sustained.
Mhm.
But we're looking at it from the perspective of what our life needs to survive. We're carbon based and we need a certain composition of elements and oxygen, and our bodies require water, and we have these specific needs, but that's one version of life. And then there are, I think that the whole light body thing, that beings can have incarnations as a light body where they don't have a physical body. And, there might be stars and planets that would look inhospitable because we're looking at them from something that you need a physicality to be able to survive on. So
Mhm.
our whole perspective, especially in the mainstream, of what can sustain life and what life means,
Yeah.
is not necessarily congruent with what I think the actual possibilities and reality are.
Hmm. I love the way you describe that, only because this is what I get frustrated with is that I understand that science is important, that we have scientists, that we have met, we understand all these things. But as we've discovered, as we evolve, what we thought to be true at one point in our existence, um, ends up not being true. Meaning, you fall off the edge of the world if you go on a boat and go in the water. Well, they figured out, no, actually it keeps going and the earth goes round. And um we don't need to go down the flat earth stuff. But my point is that
Yeah.
the point is that
Yeah, that's a whole
what
other kettle of fish
that's
these
that's a
days.
whole other thing. But what cavemen thought of who we were and what we were doing is much different than where we are now. And so that the idea that we just now in 2025 we've got it all figured out and we is both naive and destructive actually for our own evolution. That it's much better to have, call it an imagination, call it uh,
Openness,
openness to
humility.
possibility and be wrong. I'd rather be, as long as it's not harmful, I'd rather think of the possibilities and be wrong than to completely shut it down and think that we've all got it figured out. Because, I mean, if you look around and you hear what people are saying, not a lot of people are happy right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are feeling like, what is going on? And if this is all we are, that's a scary thought, which we know is not true. This is why I talk to the people I talk to and get to really experience what people are finding out about who we truly are. But I just think it's good to be open and it's good to see that we have more of that. Um, did that, so just a quick run around to where, because when you did have other experiences in your life,
Mhm.
did those experiences, and maybe you can tell us about one of them or whatnot, but is that what shifted you into what the work you're doing now completely, or was it already happening beforehand?
No, actually, I was already doing this type of work before I started having those metaphysical experiences. So I already had the podcast. I was teaching meditation and guiding others. Um, but it just came in, and it's been a series of different experiences. I feel like there was a big concentration of experiences, maybe for like 2 or 3 years, and then they sort of tapered off. But and it wasn't just one thing that happened. Sometimes it was a very physical experience. For me, I'll just kind of go into a little bit of the details of it. It was not, as you said, it wasn't like a near-death experience. It was in that hypnagogic state between wakefulness and sleep. So it wasn't even in the meditation space when I was deliberately meditating, but it was when I was trying to fall asleep. And then it got to the point when I'd had more experience with it, where it was like I'd try to hold myself open and not dip into the edge of like actually falling asleep, just to see if, like, kind of inviting these things in. And they're not something that really can be forced, but it was like, okay, if I can just hold this, um, then maybe things will, because the way that a lot of times it appears to me, or at least the way that it often starts, it's like these realms, or that they're always there, but it's my ability to focus in a certain way. And so it's just the same way that you focus your eyes. And it reminds me a lot of times of, in the 90s, we had these like magic eye art
I remember
posters.
these things. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it'd look like static. It would just look very staticky. And then you'd soften your gaze. And once you got your focus right, some image would jump out at you. But it was,
Mm.
you had to sit with it. You had to soften your gaze. You had to relax. You couldn't force it. And eventually something would pop out and it would be really clear and it would look three-dimensional. And that is the essence of what it's like. It's like this static that I see behind my closed eyes, where it's just a ton of, like, when I close my eyes, it's not black. And I imagine it's the same for everybody, where it's like we think that we close our eyes and it's black, but it's actually just like a lot of, if you actually look at it, it's speckled color that's moving. It's like
Mm.
static. And it's like it's like with patience and with a soft focus inwardly, that would start to take shape, and colors would start showing themselves,
Mm.
and shapes would start to emerge. And then I would see, it's like, then I would feel that I am within this realm. But the way that it also felt was like it's always there, but
Mm.
it just, I
Mhm.
was able to experience it. And I've noticed different things, like if I'm aware that like I'm in a certain place in my brain, like Like I could have if I knew how to map the brain, like I could have a coordinate, like, okay, my attention is really, really focused in this one specific spot. And it's like I'm just stimulating with my awareness one place in my brain. And as I move that awareness, it changes. What I'm experiencing changes. So it might get like thinner, it might thin out and just be, and maybe be not so colorful. It might turn into like much thinner, like gold, like connected gold rods almost,
Mm.
where it just looks like, I call it like scaffolding, but more intricate than scaffolding. Because when I think of scaffolding, I just think of rectangles, but
Right.
this would be like the like wires that are holding that you could put structure over.
Mm.
It's like it thins out and eventually it can thin out to where it looks like space. And it just looks like this, there are like pinpoints of light around, but it just feels like this void, like this huge space. There's no floor, there's no ceiling.
Right.
It's just space. And so there's another time, and other, because it's not always the same, but a lot of times it
Hmm.
is this like traversing through layers, and it feels like the density is falling away too. But
Wow.
there are other
Yeah.
parts to it. There's the brain, there's the focus within the brain, but there have been associated vibrations within my body and usually lined up with the chakras. So, I might feel like like a physical vibration as though my heart chakra is vibrating. And I've even felt like, I think I can feel that even in the bed. Like it was vibrating so much that it's like I can feel the bed vibrating in that spot too.
Hmm.
So there's that aspect, but there's often like a visual that goes with it as well. And there can be, like, okay, well, where is my awareness in my brain? Like it's very there's a lot of input and there's a lot of like, multifaceted. And then there are also sometimes there are solutions that come in. Sometimes I hear things. There might be like auditory aspects to it. So I'm kind of like lumping a lot of the experiences into an explanation because sometimes there are repeating patterns or repeating flavor to the experiences where it's like, oh, okay, I recognize this.
Hmm.
Um, one quote unquote realm, as I would call it, a realm. But like I say, it's not like I'm very aware that I'm still in my body as well. Because there are times where I have seen like a hallway that feels very much like, it's very bright. Um, and it's like I'm moving through a corridor and I'm like,
Hmm.
am I on a ship or am I like in a place? And then I like feel back into my body. I'm like, no, I'm in my bed. Like I'm here. I'm in like the physical
Right.
world too,
Yeah.
but I'm also like I can very clearly see a hallway and a corridor. Um, so there are, but sometimes there are it's rarer for me to have the auditory piece, but there have been a couple of times where I've heard names and they don't mean anything to me, but I've written them down. Um, I've heard dates that go with, so I've heard things like, okay, so we're recording this on October 30th. I would hear like Monday, December 14th. And I'd be like, well, I don't know if December 14th, like it'd be that far out where it was like in the near future-ish, but I had no idea if that was the right day that of the week. So I would write that down and then look the next day and I'm like, oh my God, it is on a Monday. That's happened twice where I'm like, oh, it is on a
Wow.
Monday or it is on a Friday. And nothing, and I kind of kept my eye out, like, is something big going to happen? And nothing like big happened globally, but I know specifically for the first time that happened, I felt a huge upgrade happen on that specific day.
Oh, wow.
I just so happened to go to a high vibrational place and then had this whole expansive like experience. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's that day. So it was a big day for me, but Yeah, so there can be different elements, but it's less common for me to hear things. But sometimes I hear things. A lot of times when I do hear things, I can't understand what it is. Like it sounds like it's a different language. Sometimes I'm like, is that Chinese or Japanese or is it like a star language?
Mm.
It's not, and it's happening so fast. And there's a part of my brain, it's so interesting. I'm curious if anybody can relate to this because it's like I can listen to it and I can hear it fine. But as soon as I switch over to trying to understand it, I can't hear it anymore. So it's like there's an analytical side to my brain. I think it goes back to that right brain, left brain. But
Hmm.
if I just want to hear it, I can hear it and it just flows. But if I try to like, okay, because I know a little bit of Italian, so I'm like, it's not Italian. I'm like, does it sound like Chinese? Does it sound like Japanese? Does it sound like Sanskrit? But as soon as I get that part of my brain involved, I can't hear it anymore, which is just like
Hmm.
fascinating to me. I
Wow.
don't know.
No, I'm gonna mention something because you're saying things that would resonate with just different conversations I've had over the years with people, right? Um, because you're I mean, I've loved the whole conversation here because you're someone who's gotten to a point where whether it be through your meditation or the awareness of being okay in that space where you're not awake, not asleep, that space that it's when you're just completely kind of going offline. And I'm gonna bring something up only just because I just released an episode on this, and it was with someone who's worked with plant medicine, and I don't go down the realm too often with it, but we can call it plant medicine, call it whatever we want to call it. But I've known people to try experimental things, and I'm definitely not indicating people should go do this at all, and I don't myself. But what I will say is, from conversations with people who've gone that route, the way you're explaining some of what you've seen or felt uh, is similar to what they would see or feel.
Yeah, and I will offer the clarification too. Like I have had some mushroom experiences over
Mhm.
time. These experiences that I'm talking about in particular, I was not on mushrooms. I was going to bed. So,
Right.
but
So you can
as
probably
far as
relate to what I'm saying then in
I
comparison, right?
can,
Because that's a
yes,
push through of it. This is just more
yeah,
of like you're just touching it. You're just like
yes,
it's still
yeah.
there. Yeah.
And it is a little bit different because I have had those experiences. There are similarities, but I also wonder if I can't remember if the first time, well, I know that the very first time that I had anything like this, I had never had mushrooms or anything, and that was seemed like an initiation. Like there were these symbols that flashed in, and I was like, what in the world is that? I didn't know anything about sacred geometry, which is now a big part of my experience. But I wonder if plant medicine played a role to kind of open up those pathways for me to be able, because it does feel like I use the example of like blowing up a balloon for the first time.
Mhm.
And there's that resistance. Like it's kind of hard to get the balloon to take shape the first time you expand it. But then if you blow it up again, like if you let it deflate and then you blow it up again, it's so much easier. And it just keeps getting easier and
It's
easier.
like a muscle
Um,
in a way.
right.
Yeah.
And it's like these same, things get stretched out. And I feel like there are pathways that I've carved and through these experiences that help me to be able to do it, without mushrooms. Um, and, I love that there are people who are facilitating experiences like that because it is a sacred experience. I was just talking with somebody um, who was joking about like giving their mom uh, like a little dose of LSD just as a joke, to put it in their drink or something, in just a tiny amount or whatever. And I was like, oh, that is funny. Like I see the humor of what you're trying to do, but like that type of experience, that's her psyche. Like that's
Mhm.
sacred.
Yeah.
That's not a joke. And so you talk about like the hippie movement and all of that, and the recreation around it is different than the sacredness of
Right. Right.
what the experience can be. And so I encourage people, if they do feel drawn to that, be very deliberate and intentional. Make sure that you understand the facilitator. Let it be a sacred experience. Let it be something you prepare for. You prepare your body, you prepare your psyche for it. You allow time to integrate it. And, I don't encourage like a recreational use. Like, let's just, do this for the sake of exploring the realms of consciousness, the edges of consciousness. I think that
Hmm.
there is a more appropriate way to do that.
Hmm. But in a way, and I love the way you say that, exploring the edges of consciousness. That's what you essentially are doing when you're in your meditation practice or in these waves of, in and out of sleep mode, that we're still doing that.
Right.
And that's why I always say I'm not completely against people doing it. I guess my hope is that we continue to be able to have practices that allow us to go into these spaces without that. But some people want to have that. I've always said, like with ayahuasca, I bring this up sometimes, like that would be an incredibly insane experience, and I probably wouldn't do it unless I was really needing it. Like it was like at my,
Yeah.
but some people find that that is something they want, and those are sacred spaces that people go to the rainforest to do it, or they go like different places, and there's people that facilitate it, and like that's very, very important that you're in a very safe space with those types of things, because it's not something to
A
play
hundred
with.
percent.
Yeah.
100%. And, there also is the issue of Westerners flocking to these native spaces. And one, what does that do to their culture? So, taking personal accountability for like, okay, am I part of a bigger problem here where people are seeking this out? But the other thing is like the people who are facilitating these, you maybe have some shamans that come from strong lineages and they've been, their families have been doing this for generation after generation, and you've got unscrupulous people doing it. That is absolutely happening. People are getting taken advantage of. So you have to go into it with your eyes open. Don't go in thinking, that you're going to be protected if you're not being deliberate and smart and holding it, as a divine experience and letting, using your intuition in that type of situation. And going back to the Egyptians too, if you look at the hieroglyphs, it does seem that there maybe was some sort of substance. There was a lot of like spoons where they're showing, and
Oh
that's
no.
like part of the process. So that blew my mind when I learned that. I don't think they know. I heard like William Henry talking about some sort of powder. There's some sort of powder that was part of like an alchemical initiation type of thing. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of unknowns there, but it does seem that there was some sort of
Hmm.
potentially some sort of substance that was assisting in those initiations.
Just soup, everybody. They were just having soup.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. But no, like, yeah, yeah. I'm sure this has been going on a long time. And at that time, it wasn't seen as probably something terrible to, it was just something
Right.
that existed. Not everybody, just because it's there doesn't mean everybody wants to have that experience either, right? So
Right.
it was
Yeah.
probably just treated kind of like medication is, or whatnot, right? So, yeah, so very, very interesting stuff. As we wind down, I really wanted to, just in your backdrop there, I see that you have the book, Your Authentic Awakening, I think it's called, if I'm right.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And in it do you talk a lot about balancing everyday life and things like that in this, if I was looking up?
So, yeah, it's Your Authentic Awakening, a guide to everyday spiritual living. So, it is talking about a lot of what we talked about here today in terms of letting yourself have this spiritual unfoldment that happens against the backdrop of your modern life and not, feeling that you have to completely uproot your life and, come into a completely different practice. It can be jolting when we have an awakening and we might feel like, okay, now I need to have a different type of life. And that can lead to some confusing ideas about what spirituality is and how to nurture that type of thing, because when we don't have a spiritual mindset, we're living a certain way and we may feel like, okay, now I've got to make 180 degrees. I've got to go, run off and live in a monastery or something. I don't know.
Mhm.
But it's really just kind of honoring and the exploration of the unfoldment of who we are. And then I do have a few examples, and I take people through the some of the mystical experiences I've had that we've touched on here today, and some of the things, some of the insights that have come
Hmm.
through that. And it's really kind of a consciousness exploration book.
And then with the work that you do, how do people get in contact with you? Like, because I'm sure you do a lot of different things. I think I've seen you do even retreats and different things like that. I don't know if that's still going on, but I was trying to look at your website and stuff. But can I get your website
Yeah.
for everybody?
Yeah, the website is karagoodwin.com. Kara is with a K. And then I have summits that I do regularly. Those are just online summits where I get some experts together on a common theme. So I have on December 6th coming up the Miracle Summit. And I've got 10 speakers for that. And we're going to, or maybe it's nine, might be nine speakers for that one. And we're going to go deep into miracles and get into that vibration. The whole point of those really behind the scenes is like to cultivate this vibration, this energy container for everybody to immerse themselves in and let our souls kind of soak that up. And we do that through story and through transmissions and through the gifts that the other people bring. But that's really the heart of it. And then I like to have that, right around the holidays so that we're nice and soaked in that, and then we're radiating that out through our interactions. All my podcast episodes are on soulelevationpodcast.com. I have a Learn to Meditate program. I've got a sacred geometry, recorded sacred geometry workshop series. I have a community that we get together and meditate together online and have discussions and spiritual support and things like that too, called the Healing Hearth.
So lots of things, and probably will
Yeah.
just keep expanding. It's the same thing I'm
Yeah.
witnessing with the work that I'm doing here. Like I love music coaching. I'm now doing some spiritual coaching and things like that. And then obviously the podcast. And it just, when you get into your heart-centered place, everything starts to expand more and you start to do different things. And it's a different feeling, as you know, because you've lived the two different worlds, right? So you know
Yeah.
one feels different than the other. And it's not to take away that stuff, but it's my encouragement to everybody is to always go after what your heart's telling you, right? And as long as it's safe and you don't want to just go quit your job, you want to make sure you're understanding what you're getting yourself into, but you just slowly move into it. You start to do the things you love and they feel good doing, and then things start to kind of like open up, doors start to
Mm.
open, and or you get that idea to go do this one thing, and then next thing you know you're doing it, right? And that's kind of what happened with Soul Inspired. I have no idea what I'm doing here, but here I am about a year and a half later. So it's been an amazing journey. It just keeps growing, and I get to get amazing guests like you on, Kara. So I always end the show with the last question I always end with, and it's just a simple. We've talked a lot about different things here today, and it's just to ask you, like, why do we reincarnate here? Why do we come and do this thing? If there's so much beauty on the other side or in different realms, and you can be a light body possibly, and all these great things, why would we come here and go through these? I love life, but there's some days where I'm like, I'd rather just go back to bed, you know? And so why do we come and do this?
I believe that our soul came for a purpose and it wants to expand. The soul is growing. So for a while, I thought, oh, my soul is perfect and it knows everything, and this body is trying to catch up. This human experience is trying to catch up. But now my understanding is that the soul is growing as well, and the soul wants to experience. And the creator source, where we actually come from, fractalized itself in order to have experience as well. The creator wants to experience through us. And that's the opportunity that we have. We have a huge opportunity here through the diversity and through the challenges that we have. This is a very challenging place to have a life, and there's enormous potential for soul growth here. So even when we are feeling overwhelmed and we're feeling defeated, that's actually beautiful soul food.
We are definitely in alignment because I feel the exact same way. And when you said that creator fractalized itself, that's the way I try to explain it to people when I'm talking to them about how we are this piece of soul, we are this energy that is part of God. Because there's a lot of confusion. Because be like, well, I am God then. And then they say, how can I be Almighty and be God? And then we get down these deep conversations, and I say, well, let's dig into that a little further, what that means. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. We're parts of it.
Mhm.
And just the idea that God, Him, herself, was able to just go, and then we became these pieces of that, and we can now grow. It's pretty remarkable to think about, and I'm in that same alignment of how I feel, and I usually don't give too strong of an opinion, but that piece of my opinion is in alignment with you. So I appreciate you coming
That's
on and
beautiful.
sharing your story, and talking to everybody about all your different experiences. And I'm sure there's a lot more, like you said. I would encourage anybody to check out your book. I always talk to the soul inspired audience and just say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to the Soul Inspired. As you know, this is why we do it. And we get amazing guests like Kara on so that we can keep building insights into who we are. And again, thank you so much, Kara, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
Joe. What a
much.
beautiful discussion. Thank you.
So vision. So